Good morning. It's Alan again with Rich Chessor. Chessor is British Swimming's nutrition lead. I've been fortunate enough to see and work with Rich over the last 2-3 years with our podium potential and podium athletes that we've been lucky enough to have come through the Ellesmere program. Rich is a bit of a genius. I think he probably gets a bit frustrated when we sit at meals and he's got a big fat guy opposite the table to him, and I'm going, should I be eating this? And he probably knows that I'm not eating what I should be away from the meal. But it's been an absolute pleasure working with him and being with him and around him. And so I've thrown out some questions to you guys to say, what do we want to know during this period and away from this period? And you've come back with the following 15 questions. So number one, welcome, Rich.
Thank you.
And number two, if you're an age group swimmer and you're at a competition and it could be from 7:30 in the morning till 7:30 at night, what would your advice be? Would it be big meals or snacks, or how would you go about that?
Okay, it's a great question. It's one that get asked quite a bit. And the answer is just a balance that sits in between there somewhere. First thing I'd suggest is you've got to look at your schedule. You've got to look at the schedule and work out where there are small gaps, where there are bigger gaps, because you want to be eating a meal. If you don't eat a meal, there's going to be, I suppose whilst you can continue to graze and have small snacks throughout the day, you're probably going to be able to meet your energy needs for that day, but you're never going to feel full. You're never going to feel content. You're probably going to never feel particularly energized and ready to race again. So I'd want there to be at least one fairly substantial meal in there, so you're not always, you're not just grazing. The next probably important thing to say is when you find that opportunity for a meal, try and protect that space. Think of it almost as a race or a session in itself, so that you're not just sitting down in the stands and guzzling out of a Tupperware box some whatever pasta you can get into. Try and protect that meal so you feel as if you're sat down. You've got 20 minutes or so protected for that, and you can eat, you can chew thoroughly, and you can digest better, because anytime that you're eating on the go and you're eating on the rush, you're probably not chewing properly. You're putting a whole heap of food into your stomach that's just going to be difficult to digest. And as a result, you're not going to get any functional performance benefit out of that meal. So protect the space and protect the time. So come back to just look for the time where you can have that bigger meal, and then build your snacks in and around that. It's not a problem to be having snacks, but you do want to have a bit of space for a bigger meal, and then make sure you're having a really big meal or your biggest meal of the day right at the end of the day once you finish competing.
Perfect. And with the current climate that we're in at the moment, would you advise, for parents, this is as well as the swimmers, would you advise putting a plan in place for the week?
I don't think you necessarily need a full plan for the week, but I would say there's two areas to focus on. The first one is know what the first thing you're going to do in the day is going to be. So particularly nutrition-wise, know what that first meal is going to be. Is it going to be breakfast as soon as you wake up, as you normally would, or are you going to have breakfast slightly later? What's that breakfast going to look like? So have that planned in, and then probably then focus your next bit of attention on your evening meal in the evening, because that's the time where you can be a little bit more creative. We've probably got that little bit more time in our hands where we can prep meals a little bit more. We can start from basic ingredients instead of using existing processed foods and ingredients. So I would be creative in the evening, but absolutely know what your first meal of the day is going to be, and have a bit of a plan, a bit of a justification for what that meal is as well.
Excellent. So if you went with a plan, whether it was for the day, for the week, for your shopping, especially at the moment as well, what would you look at if you go into the shops, as you know right now? We'll go in and there's no pasta, there's no rice, there's varied fruit on the shelves and vegetables. Would you have any supplements that you would use in terms of, if there wasn't pasta, what would you go for, kind of thing?
Yeah, so the first thing you've got to do is be a bit creative. Yes, we're all challenged with the stock issues that the supermarkets are facing. That will start to normalize a little bit more. So we're probably only talking about something that's going to be an issue over the next 1 to 2 weeks, hopefully no more than that. So yeah, you do need to be a little bit creative. Maybe think about, well, just because you don't know what that vegetable or that fruit is, stick it into Google. You'll find a recipe very quickly off of the back of that. The good things about the majority of the items that are in slightly lower stock, so things like breads, rice, pastas that you mentioned, is they are largely interchangeable. So if you think of breads, for example, one of the things that we would quite often do at home would be, or recommend to the swimmers, would be using a tortilla wrap as a pizza base, for example. Now you could swap that tortilla wrap out for just a regular slice of bread. You could swap it out for a pita bread. You could swap it out for a flatbread, for a bagel, anything like that. So breads are pretty versatile. Don't think that the only thing you can do is have regular white bread or regular toast. And similarly goes for pastas, rices. Maybe now's the time to be a bit more experimental with stuff like couscous or quinoa or bulgur wheat or some of these items. Again, most of them can be swapped out is when the item is on its own. So if it was a spaghetti bolognese, it's not a problem to swap out that spaghetti for a rice or for a quinoa or a couscous. Where it's layered into the dish like a lasagna, yeah, you're not going to be able to replace that quite well, but just rethink how that dish is going to be composed, and you'll still get the same nutritional benefits out of it. When it comes to legumes, beans, and so on, they're pretty much interchangeable. So wherever you would put maybe a kidney bean, you can swap that in for a cannellini or a butter bean or something like that. That goes really well in sauces. So particularly if you are maybe short on fresh meats, mince or something like that, you can increase the protein content and bulk out that meal using beans and pulses quite quickly. And then when it comes to veg, you can swap around green veg pretty much for any other green veg. They can be interchanged really, really quickly and easily. And if you don't get access to fresh veg, you can swap that in and around for, or do experiment with frozen or with canned veg as well. Frozen veg nowadays, they freeze it so quickly after harvest that you lock those nutrients in really quite well. So gone are the days where we tend to think of fresh being the best and the only good source of vitamins and minerals from veg. Frozen is still incredibly high from a nutrient profile perspective. So frozen mixed medley veg, sweet corn, peas, these sorts of things can easily be thrown in just to bulk out meals and pad out meals when your normal ingredients aren't quite as available.
Excellent. This one may hit the older end of the scale and going towards that more elite level, but caffeine is used, and we've spoke about this, is used as a stimulant now for athletes. And what age would swimmers start considering this, or is there a certain level that you look at that you would start considering using caffeine pre-race?
So there's not a hard and fast rule. As a performance enhancing supplement, we'd look at it on an individual basis and say what's most appropriate for that individual and their performance at that time. Generally, though, I wouldn't be thinking of it as a discussion point until the athlete is at least 16, if not closer to 18. And it would be based on some of the lifestyle factors. So particularly how much caffeine is already in their diet. Do they regularly drink teas, coffees, use of energy drinks, and so on and so forth, out with a performance focus. So yeah, it would probably be that, like you say, the slightly older level of athlete before I'd start having those conversations about it. Caffeine is pretty well established as what we call an ergogenic aid, so performance enhancing aid, but not everybody responds in the same way. Particularly when we look at endurance work, we get people who positively respond, people with a neutral response, and actually people who perform worse when it comes to caffeine. So I'd be very cautious about thinking that caffeine is going to be the solution to everybody's problems, or certainly anything that everybody thinks that they must be having in order to produce their best performance. It is far, far from that, and it's far more complex than that. So anytime that we do investigate the use of caffeine, we start at very, very low levels, and as we very slowly, very gradually build up until we find the point at which we think we're getting the best performance impact, but paying the least amount of tax on it. And the tax typically that you end up paying is being hyper-aroused and alert. And if that then has a knock-on effect on sleep quality, sleep duration, then we start having, we have problems, particularly when it comes to competition and recovery as well. So I'd tread cautiously with caffeine. It's not what people make it out to be a lot of the time, and certainly isn't necessary to put in excellent performances.
And something we spoke about before was trial it in training for a stand up, and then work into a lower level meet, and then work into, so you get used to it more than anything, isn't it? I assume.
Yeah, very, very much so. We always make sure that we've got our strategy when it comes to race day nutrition dialed in well before we get to the major meet of the season.
Okay, excellent. Do you have any recommendations on foods that females should consider before, during, and after menstrual cycles to help them through that period of time?
So this is an interesting one. It's a difficult one. Generally speaking, the research on nutrition and in training with menstrual function isn't as strong as we would like it to be, and probably isn't as strong as some people might lead you to believe as well. So I'd tread really cautiously about either prescribing certain foods, certain diets, as well as any exercise guidance based on stage of menstrual cycle, because the information isn't really that strong. So I'd hold off making any clear recommendations in around food. Some things we do know is that particularly during the luteal phase of the menstrual cycle, so that's the phase pre-menses, so in the sort of second half of the women's menstrual cycle, that does come with some slight changes from a metabolic perspective. So we do start to see slight increase in carbohydrate storage, a slight decrease or a slight increase in fat metabolism as well. So there's a few things that are going on there, but it's not strong enough for us to be able to recommend particular foods or a particular format or style of diet. And the other thing to say there is that every woman's menstrual cycle is different and is unique to them. So whilst we might be able to say that certain things are happening during certain phases of the cycle, it's not to say that they're all going to be happening at that exact same time or same relative time for each individual. So I'd tread cautiously on this one for just now.
And the positivity from that conversation is how far we've come as coaches and support staff, in that we can actually talk about women's menstrual cycles, which 2-3 years ago was a no-no, and I think that's only going to help performance increase within our sport. So that's a good start, I think.
Indeed, and I'd absolutely encourage any female athlete to be comfortable enough to have that conversation with their coach and with their support team, because the more that we can understand that, the better we are able to work with it as opposed to working around it.
Yeah. Excellent. In particular with Ellesmere College age group, so we're 9 to 17-year-olds. Do you recommend supplements? I've had a list here of vitamin D or iron or extra vitamins. Do you recommend it at this stage? And if you do, would that be different for males and females?
So first of all, we'd look to receive everything we could through the diet. And there's no real good reason, providing somebody's eating sufficient total energy, and the energy needs of most of your guys are going to be incredibly high because they're still going through growth, development, maturation phases, as well as swim training, as well as land-based training that's going to place additional energy challenges on their body. So I'd imagine the majority of your guys aren't going to be on low-calorie intakes, and therefore there should be no reason, as long as they're eating quite a diverse mixed diet, that they should need to supplement with anything above and beyond that. However, you mentioned vitamin D and iron, and they're probably the two that I'd be more concerned about than anything. So vitamin D, commonly called our sunshine vitamin, we synthesize it on our skin after exposure to the sun. And unfortunately, in the northern hemisphere, or particularly northern Europe, we just don't get enough sun exposure in the winter months. So that goes from September, October time, all the way through to about May time. So even on a government-based public health recommendation, they recommend supplementing with a low dose of vitamin D each day. So that's about 400 international units is the dosage there. So we'd fall into line with that, because we also know from athlete data that a low vitamin D status is associated with a number of challenges, particularly increased susceptibility to illness, increased susceptibility to injury as well. So vitamin D probably would be one that I would recommend investing in a low dose supplement at the vast majority of age stages, as it is, like I say, part of a government health backed strategy. With iron, again, if your total calorie intake is sufficient, and again, consuming a mixed nutrient diet, so not excluding particularly red meats, shellfish, green leafy veg, some forms of nuts and seeds as well, then again, iron intake should be pretty high. The challenge that we've got is that our iron needs in young athletes and developing athletes are that little bit higher than even they are in adults. So we've just got to be making sure that we are fairly diligent with our iron intake strategies. And if that's not possible, and the only way you'd really know that is through a bit of a thorough dietary assessment, then supplementation with iron would be another step, or one step that you could be taking.
Excellent. This is quite an open-ended one, this one, but if you have parents, would you be able to give them a rough guide for that range of 9 to 17? I've sent you over the rough pull session idea, but I guess it's just a calorie increase kind of percentage type of thing, I would something like that.
Yeah, it largely is. Looking through that age range, I'm going to have to be fairly broad with this, so don't hold me account to any of the numbers. But for a 9-10-year-old, you might be looking at a calorie intake in the range of around about 2,000 to 2,500 calories, and then as you move up into that 16-year-old plus 9 pull sessions, you're looking in excess of about 3,500 calories, I think, just to maintain body weight and maintain energy balance across there. If there are goals to particularly in that 14 to 16 and over age bracket, once we add in the additional energy requirements of growth and maturation and that secondary growth spurt, then we'll probably be touching regularly above and beyond 3,500, possibly closer to 4,000 calories. So pretty high intakes when you consider the average intake, or the recommended average intake for an adult male would be around 2,500 calories. So we're talking a good 50 to 70% increase above them.
So a knock on from that one is because obviously we've had a lot of reduction in what we're able to do at this point. Is there any shift in what they should be doing now?
Yeah, I would say that generally you should be seeing a decrease in calorie intake just now, maybe in the realm of about 20 to 25% or so. But hopefully that's happening just naturally. There should be an appetite suppression effect as a result of the decreased training load, and hopefully we've seen also a decrease in our performance-focused eating strategies. So people not necessarily having recovery snacks after swim sessions, or having an extra bowl of cereal to fuel a swim session. So hopefully that decrease is happening fairly naturally. But if you find some of your guys are still eating at the same rate and still feeling or not feeling satisfied by a different volume, then I would just start slowing things down a little bit. Maybe just eat that little bit slower, be that a little bit more mindful, like we talked about being at competition, and protect the space to be eating, and slow everything down that little bit. And we'll probably find that people are being satisfied through almost a slightly more normal-sized meal, as opposed to eating, let's call it a swimmer-sized portion, because they need to fuel and they need to recover from the training session. So yes, there should be a slight decrease in calorie intake just now, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's happening naturally without being an intentional strategy.
Well, we've kept same meals, smaller plates. That's it. It was the simplest way we could do it. I had a few around snacks and so on. So I've kind of bulked that together as a pre-post pull snack, what you would recommend for males or females, whether that be different or not different. And then also reminding ourselves that we have quite a lot that are in boarding houses, and so they may have limited access to fridges.
Yep. So what you need post-training, you want some carbohydrates to replenish the energy that you've used in the training session. You want some protein to help repair the damaged tissue, or the damage to the tissue that you've created in that session. And then you want some fluids to rehydrate. So recovery-wise, we talk about the 3 R's. We talk about replenish with carbohydrates. We talk about rehydrate with fluids. And we talk about repair with protein sources. So the simple and easy ways to go about that are doing something like having a sandwich with a glass of orange juice. So the bread component gives you your carbohydrates. They also get carbohydrates from the fruit juice. The fruit juice gives you your fluid component to rehydrate, and then the protein is going to come from the filling in that sandwich. So practical ideas, particularly if you're in boarding houses, going to be tin food. So tinned fish would be a great option. That could be a tuna sandwich or a tuna toasty. It could be some sardines on toast would be a great option. Alternatively, you could get the beans out and pop them into the pop them onto the hob and do some beans on toast. Or if you've got the hob, you can have some eggs in there for your protein source and pop some eggs on toast. So those would be the quick and easy practical ones. I noticed the next question as well was about smoothies, and that would be an ideal one to do. If you can get the smoothie with the base of that either being a dairy product, so it could be milk or it could be yogurt, that's going to hit your needs very, very quickly and very conveniently with minimal time, minimal prep.
Excellent. I'll jump the smoothie question.
Well, just to go into the smoothie, when it comes to what goes into it, pretty much anything goes. Certainly in my household, smoothies are used when we've got maybe some fruit that's just going a little bit soft or isn't going to be quite as appetizing to eat fresh, or we've got stuff that we've chucked in the freezer and you know, you've got some leftover spinach that you want to throw in there as well. So pretty much anything goes in the smoothie. I'd really encourage people to be experimental with it and use it as an easy way of getting another of your, what we shoot for is 7 fruit or veg intakes per day. So smoothies are very comfortable, very convenient and easy one to do that.
Some of the British swimming athlete meals that have been going on the website for a long time now, not just recently, but for a long time now. Is there any ideas to consider putting some up for this period of time that obviously may be affected by what you can have and can't have?
Yeah, I think that's a very smart, very good idea. Like I said before, hopefully we're not going to be in this period for particularly long, and by that I mean the period in which we are we're experiencing restrictions in what produce we can access. But yeah, I think it's a very good idea, and maybe giving one base recipe and then 2 or 3 options that we can utilize in and around that that can be flexed in or out based on what ingredients you have.
And on the back of media, social media stuff, any recommendations for good social media outlets at the moment? So the chefs or anyone that's doing some good stuff that could point us in the right direction.
Yeah, I think there's quite a few out there. I would, you know, if you're looking at YouTube, even looking at the common ones, such as Jamie Oliver is doing some great stuff at the moment, and is great at showing how you know, a very simple ingredient or a store cupboard ingredient can go a long way under a number of different ways. For general meals, there's a YouTube channel called Fit Men Cook, which is an American-based channel, but fantastic for demonstrating how budget meals can be pulled together based on very simple ingredients and all very well nutritionally balanced and incredibly appetizing. And it's a good it's a good fun, easy to watch channel as well. When it comes to Instagram's probably the other major source then. A couple of people that I would always recommend. There's a chap called Daniel Davey who goes under the name of Davey Nutrition, D-A-V-E-Y Nutrition. And I can send you links to these afterwards, Alan, if you want to pop them out. Hexus is another good source of meal ideas, recipe ideas. And British Women's Nutrition intern consultant, The Cooking Yam. So Tiff Affleck, who goes under the name of The Cooking Yam, always putting out incredibly good content, particularly in around breakfast, lunch, brunch ideas that would be great for you to experiment with in the kitchen.
Final 3.
Mm-hmm.
Should I eat before morning training?
Great question. The answer is kind of, it depends. And it largely depends on what you are used to. If you are a regular breakfast eater before the training session, I would probably say just continue with that. Because when we have somebody who's regularly eating breakfast and then we ask them not to eat breakfast, they actually struggle quite a lot. Whereas there's quite a few individuals who, if they don't eat breakfast regularly and then we ask them to eat breakfast, actually doesn't seem to make much of a difference on their performance in that morning session. So it's really down to a little bit of personal preference. What I would say though, is if you know you've got a big session coming up in the morning and you're not a breakfast eater first thing in the morning, don't necessarily try and force yourself to eat something in the morning, but think about the night before. So think about that pre-bed snack, maybe half an hour, 45 minutes before you go to bed. Include some fruit in that, include some honey in that, maybe include some cereal, some oats in that. And you're just going to raise your carbohydrate levels in your muscles and in your liver before you go to bed. And they're going to be ready for you. the next morning when it comes to ready to train. So you're not training on empty, you're just not training on anything necessarily that's in your stomach. And the other thing to be considerate of is that if you do have, a rushed bowl of cereal first thing in the morning, and then you're straight down to the pool and you're in the water within 15 minutes or so of eating it, practically the vast majority of that food is just still sitting in your stomach. You're not going to get much of a performance benefit out of that food. So if you are going to eat in the morning, make sure you've got enough time to be able to eat that, chew that thoroughly, and then digest that before you go into the session.
Excellent. As you said, hopefully this won't go on for too long, but is there anything that you would say to people out there as a nutrition point to put in place now that could help improve their performance for when they return?
I suppose two things. One would be from a technical side of things. I think it's important that people are thinking about their sugar intake in this period. As swimmers, swimmers will get away with consuming quite a high amount of sugar within their diet because of the frequency and the duration of which they train. Whereas just now, once we remove that major element, our sugar management needs to be that little bit better. So we need to control the amount of sugar that we're consuming in order to prevent either unnecessarily increases in our energy intake, in order to maintain our dental health, and in order to maintain our long-term ability to manage our blood sugar levels. So I'd probably look to that one from a technical perspective. And then the next thing is probably linked to your kind of final question about advice for Titans in the next couple of weeks, is see the opportunities. Normal life is busy enough as it is that we can't maybe address some of the additional skills or challenges that we want to with as much level of attention and detail as we probably can be affording just now. So particularly from my world, I would say get yourself in the kitchen, get prepping, understand, sharpen up your knife skills on how to chop veg and simple things like this. Be creative with different foods that you've maybe not played about with in the kitchen in the past, or you've maybe walked past the supermarket thinking, not sure what that is. Maybe you're forced not to be able to get your normal jar of pasta sauce. Well, let's think about the ingredients in that pasta sauce and let's build it from scratch ourselves. So I'd be looking at this time as an opportunity to develop your skills in the kitchen that will last you a lifetime, but most particularly are going to be able to support you through the creation of healthy meals, healthy snacks that are going to save you time and save you energy and give you a better quality diet when you do eventually return to the pool.
Spot on, and thank you, Richard. To be honest, I know that you're a very busy man, and we're really fortunate to have you come and have a chat with us. So stay safe, stay positive, and look after yourself during this period.
Likewise, thanks very much for having me. And if there's any follow-up questions, just shoot them through, and we'll do my best to answer them.
Cheers. Thank you.
All the best.